Hi everyone, welcome back. Today's video is going to be a full palette review on the Tarte Tarteist Pro palette. This video will of course have my review and thoughts on the shadows, 5 eye looks, and swatches. The Tarte Tarteist Pro Remix palette retails for $49 US or 64 Canadian, and you're getting 20 eyeshadows in here. They are 1 gram each, and I know they come in like square pans or circular pans, but they are still 1 gram a piece. The packaging on this is fairly sleek. I like the imprint on the front. It's got that actual holographic where it kind of changes the splatter marks on the front. It's cute. And it's compact, it's sleek, it's got a huge mirror on the inside, which is really nice. Like, it covers the entire face of the palette, and it does stay upright. So if you're gonna be putting it down on a desk, it will stay up if you want to be doing your makeup that way. So when I was taking photos of this palette, I noticed something very interesting, and that is that this is pretty much a covered over Tarteist Pro palette. I think they had a lot of stock of this particular palette, so they decided to recycle the packaging and put an imprint over top. So I haven't peeled this one off because it's quite thick and quite plasticky, but what I did do is open this palette and pull up the little lip at the edge, and you can see that it's got the shade name called, I think it's called Trendy, that also appears in this palette. So they've really just covered over the palette with a sticker. I don't really care. It doesn't bother me at all, but I thought it was kind of interesting that they basically just recovered over this palette. Now, obviously the shades are different, so that's not really an issue. They must have just had overstock of this particular packaging. So just so you can see, these two palettes are very, very different. They don't really share any similarities whatsoever aside from the actual packaging. All right, I'm gonna slide in some swatches now so you can see exactly what these shadows look like on my arm, and then we'll come back and chat about them individually.
My heart rages around like an ocean in my head, because there are so many things that I left unsaid.
All right, now that you've seen the swatches, let's talk a little bit more about the shadows in depth. The colors in here are very exciting to me. I am very happy to see Tarte doing color because I feel like they're known as a very neutral brand, and while I like the quality of their eyeshadows, I'm not usually drawn to a lot of their palettes just because they're so neutral overall. So when I saw them put out this, I think I saw it on Instagram, I was so excited, and I'm happy to see Tarte doing more color. Now, what threw me about this palette is that while it is a sort of remix of the original Tarteist Pro palette, they've gone about it completely differently. So if I pull out the Tarteist Pro palette, what you'll notice with this one is that all of the square shades are matte, and the 4 circular pans are all shimmer. I really like this, and I kind of wish that they had stuck to doing this format for the Pro Remix palette, because this palette fundamentally is very, very shimmery. So shimmery that you're really only getting 3 matte colors. One of them is a bone cream shade. The other one's a cool toned matte transition color, or at least a transition color that I can use. So basically a medium brown. And then a black over here called Ink. Those are your only matte shadows. And I find that really disorienting when you come from this palette, which had a ton of matte colors and very few shimmers, to move to this sort of style. Like, I don't really understand why there's square pans and why there's circular pans. There's no distinguishing factor between the pan shape. It doesn't make a difference. Most of these are shimmers overall. So for me, I like a lot of mattes in my eyeshadow looks. I don't tend to like just a shimmery eye look. So I wish that they had stuck to just doing mattes for the square pans and then shimmers for the circular ones. That being said, I've had a lot of viewers actually point out that they don't really enjoy matte shadows. They don't incorporate them into looks, and that they prefer shimmery eyeshadow palettes, and that mattes are just basically useless to them. That's a very interesting take because that's not the way I do my makeup. So I have to acknowledge that while the sort of layout of the colors is not necessarily in my taste because I like more mattes. I think a lot of people are going to be excited by this if you really like shimmer. So if you're somebody who likes shimmer and you like color, I think this palette is actually going to excite you quite a bit. If you're somebody who likes a lot of mattes in your palettes to work around the shimmer, you might struggle a little bit with this one. That being said, the shadow quality is excellent. I have never really struggled with Tarte eyeshadows before. I love their neutral colored shadows and I like the ones that I have that are more colorful. I feel like, honestly, I think they're very consistent. I can't think of a Tarte palette that I didn't really enjoy, that the quality was bad of. I feel like they're very consistent across the board. So the shimmers in this palette are incredibly buttery, pigmented, very smooth. They're easy to apply. I never had to apply them wet because I felt like they went on very well with a dry brush. So that made me really happy. I love some of these colors just because they're so different for Tarte. This color explosion, jade green color over here, oh, that is absolutely beautiful. Artist is this, it's not a navy blue, it's more of a royal blue. It's very pigmented, it's gorgeous. There is also a lot of neutral colors in here, which when I first looked at this palette, I was super excited about the color, and then I realized how much neutral was in here, and it made me a little bit less excited. But I found that in practice, using those neutrals with the colors actually worked out really well. Now, of course, it's a very shimmery eye look practically every single time that I put a look together, so that's just something to be aware. The shimmers take over this palette completely. Other colors that I really liked are Outside the Lines, Mic Drop, and Graffiti down here. This shade reminds me so much of their chrome paint pot in the shade Fire Dancer. Such a good, vibrant, deep red color. I was so excited to see that color by Tarte because I never expected them to really put that out in a palette. Never in my mind would I expect to put Tarte to put a shimmery red color in a palette at all. So that made me really excited. The neutrals, I mean, I don't really care about them as much. I feel like I've had those kinds of shades before, so they don't really excite me from the brand. But I did find that they worked very well. They're great at like brightening up the inner corner of my eye, or, you know, making a really shimmery neutral lid color, but they're not the ones that really excite me in this palette. Now, there were a few shades that I felt weren't the best, and they were the ones over here. So Graphic is a shimmery purple, and that's what you can see in the pan, but I found that when you buffed it onto the eye, that purple shimmer basically just disappears. It basically becomes a black shadow, which I found to be kind of disappointing because when there's already a matte black shadow, I definitely don't need another black in the palette. And I wish that the essence of the color, which to me is quite purple, almost magenta pink, stood out more. That's just something I wanted from that shade, and it really didn't deliver in that respect. This one down here called Create is that typical blue, brown, or green brown pigment that we are so used to seeing. I'm honestly getting a little bit tired of seeing it in palettes. I feel like maybe it's one of those easy to make shades and brands just keep pumping it out because it's very simple. It is a gorgeous color. It is nice to apply. It makes for a lot of depth in a look, but I'm just really getting tired of seeing it, so I'm not that excited about it in this palette, and I don't think I actually use this in any of the looks that you'll be seeing coming up just because I'm so tired of it. The purple down here called Mashup really surprised me. This kind of purple does have a bit of a translucent edge to it, so when you apply it, it's on my lower lash line right now, it does sheer out a little bit, but I found that it actually built up quite well, so if I applied 2 layers, sometimes 3, I could really get that depth out of it, and that made me really happy. One thing to point out is that the matte color here, the one that I tended to use as a transition color, I think basically every single time, is very cool toned, and I would have appreciated them maybe putting in another brown of this sort of tone but make it more warm, because there's a lot of warm colors in this palette, and using a cool tone crease color seemed weird. Like, it's not something I would normally use, and yet it's the only one in here that would sort of work in my transition area, so I always opted for it. But I would have appreciated something that had a little bit more of an orange cast to it, just so I could work with the more warm tone shadows and not feel like it looks a little bit incongruent. I mean, to be honest, I'm wearing it through my transition color right now, and I basically ended up covering it with the red, so it's not like you can see it that much. But if it ever poked out too much, I felt like it was a little bit weird with the warm tones. Okay, now that we've talked about the shadows individually, let me walk you through the 5 eye looks that I created using this palette. The first look uses wall art through the crease. That's that cool toned transition brown color that I pretty much used every single time. I put Color Explosion on the lid. I love this green so much. It's absolutely beautiful. I put Artist on the outer corner, and then I used ink to deepen it up. Ink is the black color. I put Mixed Media on the brow bone, and then Flow on the inner corner of the eye to brighten it up. And the lower lash line pretty much mimics what's on my lid. So I've got Color Explosion on the inner third of the eye, and then Artist on the remaining portion of the lower lash line. Look number 2 uses wall art through the crease again. I put Mashup on the lid, which is that purple shade. I put Graffiti on the middle of the lid. I don't usually transition purple into a red, but I felt it actually worked. It was quite interesting. I put Graphic on the outer corner, and this is where I noticed that that purple magenta hue to it really does not stick around that much. You can't really see the glitter on my eye, and that's kind of disappointing. I wish that shade had more purple inherent in it as opposed to just appearing black. I have Inspiration on the inner corner of the eye, and then Mixed Media on the brow bone again. I mean, don't get me wrong, there is some purple in Graphic, and I can see that in the photo, but in person, that purple really just sort of disappears. For look number 3, I decided to go a little bit more neutral. I put wall art through the crease, splatter on the inner half of the lid and on the inner corner of the eye. I put Beat Drop on the outer corner, and I really liked how that looked there. I don't normally put a shimmery black charcoal color on the outer corner, but this did look really pretty. I used ink to deepen up that outer corner, and then I put Mixed Media on the brow bone. Look 4 is also quite neutral, and I wanted to showcase that because I feel like this palette is colorful, but there are a lot of neutral looks that you can create with it. I have wall art through the crease, Moonlit on the lid. I really like this color. It's like a pale down gold, but there's not as much yellow in it. It's really pretty. I put Spin through the outer corner and through the crease, and then I put ink on the outer corner. Didn't really love how I blended ink here, but that's just my blending skill and not necessarily representative of how the shade works on the eye. I also applied Mixed Media on the brow bone. For today's look, I took wall art and Mixed Media and blended those two together and put them through my crease. I was hoping to sort of pale out wall art a little bit, but I really don't feel like it did that much. I then put Outside the Lines on the inner third of my eye. I love this color. It is absolutely beautiful. I then took Graffiti, which is easily my favorite color in this entire palette, and put that on the outer corner of my eye and dragged it through my crease. I took Mic Drop, which is a beautiful orange, and put that between the gold and the red just to make a beautiful transition color. I then applied Mixed Media to the brow bone and then moved on to the lower lash line where I applied Mashup along the lower lash line, pretty much cover the whole thing, and then I took a little bit of Graffiti and buffed that out at the very outer corner of the lower lash line. I wanted that color to melt into the outer corner of my upper lash. I also have a little bit of Moonlit on the inner corner of my eye to brighten everything up. I really love how this eyeshadow look came out. I feel like it's a beautiful sunset, and I don't feel like this one necessarily needed matte shadows, so I'm happy that I found something that is so beautiful but so shimmery. Okay, so final thoughts on the Tarte Tarteist Pro Remix palette. My initial reaction is that I quite like this palette, but I find it a bit confusing. I think the layout is strange, and I don't really know why they went down this route of putting only 3 matte colors and the rest are shimmer. I feel like they should have stuck to the Tarteist Pro original layout and made those all matte here and those all shimmery, and I really don't know why they didn't do that. I find the layout of the palette just confusing overall because of that. There's no point having square pans and circular pans if everything is basically all shimmer with 3 mattes thrown into the square pans. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me. To be honest, I'm quite excited by this palette because it means that Tarte is going towards something a little bit more colorful, which is what I really want to see by the brand. I like their quality of eyeshadows and I like to use them, but I'm confused by this palette because I don't understand the layout. I want more color from Tarte, and this is definitely a start in the right direction, but I think it's also kind of starting off on the wrong foot. Like, I feel like people will look at this, see so much shimmer, and not buy it, but Tarte might chalk that up to people not buying it because it's so colorful. For me, I don't see it that way. I think people do want a little bit more color in their makeup because heaven knows we've got tons of neutral palettes on the market, but I feel like they went about this one just a little bit wrong. I mean, I've said this how many times at this point, but I really wish that these were all matte colors and these were the shimmers. Like, I feel like that would have upheld the idea of the Tarteist Pro palette, and I don't know why they didn't do that. So while I wanted to see more mattes in this palette, I do have to point out that I think the quality is excellent. And if you do pick this up and you like shimmery colors, I don't think you're going to be disappointed. And again, I'll say, I know there are viewers on my channel who have commented that they really just like shimmery eyeshadow and they don't need mattes. So this is the kind of palette that would work really well for you. But as somebody personally who likes more matte shadows in their palettes, I found that this one was a little bit lacking. But that's how it goes, right? We're not all looking for the exact same thing in makeup, so I think a lot of people are going to be quite happy with this palette. And honestly, I really hope that Tarte continues down the path of making more colorful eyeshadows, because I really enjoy it and I want to see that from them. All right, that's it for this review. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I'll catch you next time. Bye!